This is WFYI News Now. It's January 22nd, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a bill that could ease restrictions on renewable energy projects. Another that would require medical facilities to assess breast tissue density. A new study on the impact cigarette smoke has on dogs. A bill that would hold back thousands of students who don't pass a state reading exam. And a WFYI investigation on restraint and seclusion in schools inspired legislation at the State House.
I was completely unaware that these rooms existed, that this was something that could even be done in schools.
Those stories coming up. But first, a traffic demonstration to slow down drivers and reduce crashes shows promise. WFYI's Jill Sheridan reports on an East Side tactical urbanism project.
A stretch of 10th Street in Indianapolis's Community Heights neighborhood was targeted by a project that installed camo-colored barriers in an effort to calm traffic. Former neighborhood president Leslie Schulte says with the barriers up, drivers slowed from about 42 miles per hour to around 36.
Now, that's all pretty exciting news, right? Speeding is limited in its severity and frequency. The even more exciting news was around crashes.
Crashes dropped from about 30 in 2022 to 8 in the same period along the same 1-mile stretch of 10th Street. The neighborhood group partnered with the city for the temporary traffic calming project. The Department of Public Works will offer the tactical urbanism program to communities again this spring. I'm Jill Sheridan.
A state law says counties with wind or solar ordinances that are more restrictive than guidelines can't access state incentives. But, Rebecca Thiel reports, a state house bill would let counties that nearly meet the guidelines get them too.
Communities that adopt state guidelines for renewable energy projects can get $1 for every megawatt hour of energy generated by those projects every year for a decade. Ryan Hadley with the Indiana Office of Energy Development says some counties have laws that align closely with state guidelines but are technically more restrictive, so they can't qualify for the incentives.
One county has an ordinance that meets all of the existing model ordinance requirements but requires wind energy systems to be certified by an engineer. Another county requests a safety and security plan for solar farms.
The bill would allow the OED to designate counties as wind or solar-ready communities as long as their ordinances don't differ significantly from industry or regulatory standards or pose a big barrier to developing renewable energy projects. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
Mammograms are a less effective diagnostic tool for people with dense breast tissue, but patients may not know they have dense breast tissue. As Abigail Ruman reports, lawmakers want to require facilities to assess breast tissue density and provide that information to the patient.
Last March, the FDA published updated requirements for patients to be notified if their breast tissue is considered dense or not dense. A bill passed out of a House committee would put Indiana into compliance with these new regulations. Heather Porowski had her first mammogram in 2019, but wasn't aware of the limitations of the test. She says despite having dense breast tissue, her provider did not recommend additional diagnostic testing, and she was later diagnosed with stage 3 inflammatory breast cancer.
We have 2 sons, a junior at Indiana University and a sophomore at Fishers High School, and odds are I will not see them graduate.
Porowski says early detection can save lives. The bill requires providers to use specific language to notify patients and to inform them that other imaging can help find cancers. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Abigail Ruman.
Exposure to cigarette smoke puts dogs at a 6 times higher risk of bladder cancer. That's according to a new study of Scottish terriers out of Purdue University. Ben Thorpe has more.
The 3-year study followed 120 Scottish terriers. The breed is roughly 20 times more susceptible to bladder cancer compared with other dogs, making the effects of smoke exposure easier to measure. Deborah Knapp is a professor in the College of Veterinary Medicine at Purdue. She says researchers measured how much dog owners smoked and how much smoke exposure showed up in dog urine.
The dogs that lived in homes with cigarette smokers were 6 times more likely to develop cancer than those that didn't.
Knapp says because of urine testing, the study also showed that dogs who were exposed to smoke outside the home showed an increased risk of cancer. The study found terriers responded much better to treatment when their cancers were detected earlier. I'm Ben Thorpe.
A Senate committee approved a bill last week that would hold back thousands of students who do not pass a state reading exam. Kirsten Adair reports the bill would make multiple policy changes to address the state's reading crisis.
Under SB 1, students' reading skills would be tested starting in kindergarten. There'd be more summer school options for students who need reading intervention, and students who lack reading skills at the end of third grade would be held back. Republican Senator Linda Rogers is the author.
We don't want another child that doesn't know how to read and you to move on.
But some people worry retaining third-grade students could have negative social and emotional consequences. Representatives from Indiana's PTA and other groups spoke out against the retention aspect of the bill. The Indiana School Boards Association supports the bill but asked lawmakers to delay the retention piece until the 2025-26 school year. Republicans voted against an amendment to do that. The bill will advance to the full Senate for a vote. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Kirsten Adair.
And for our final story today, an Indiana lawmaker wants to fix systemic problems with the use and oversight of restraint and seclusion on students. Legislation now at the State House was inspired by a WFYI investigation into the lack of accountability for schools who use these practices. Lee Gaines explains.
Republican State Representative Becky Cash authored House Bill 1073. She says she was heartbroken by a WFYI investigation that found some schools aren't accurately reporting or using restraint and seclusion as intended under state law.
As a mother of children with special needs who have been in public schools, I was completely unaware that these rooms existed, that this was something that could even be done in schools.
The legislation would put cameras in special education classrooms and other areas where kids are put in timeout and seclusion. It would also make changes to the way these incidents are reported to the state, and it would require the state's Commission on Seclusion and Restraint to meet twice per year rather than just once. I'm Lee Gaines.
You can find more reporting on special education legislation at wfyi.org/news. That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Darian Benson, Drew Dodlin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Abrianna Herron. Our news director is Sarah Neal Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.